So as we think about the completion in the context of 2025, think about what are the completions that have happened and what are the new beginnings that have happened throughout of the year. What are the completions that might happen that you might need to happen in 2026 and the new beginnings that you imagine in 2026? And how will you remap your direction, your mind, your thinking, your action? How will you remap your community to be consistent with that which you're committed to? Welcome back. Welcome back. And well, it is that time of the year already. Honestly, I went back and forth about whether or not I was going to record an end of the year episode because I personally am not one for New Year's resolutions and really making a big deal about goal setting at the beginning of the year because we all know that people set goals, they set New Year's resolutions, and then they sometimes almost immediately, but eventually break them. But as I thought about it, I felt like there's really something to completion and beginnings. And so I wanted to actually come and do this end of the year episode as a reflection around how we complete things and how we begin things and allow that to potentially be a guide or a pathway or a roadmap into what 2026 holds for you and what 2025 has brought. When I think about completions and beginnings or beginnings and endings, I will say that I've had a lot of endings and beginnings over this past year. And I'm constantly navigating new beginnings, but I'm constantly navigating little areas of completion. And one of those completions is with a business partner of mine. And she's also a friend, a dear friend. But we made a decision. We made a decision to complete our a portion, a part, or an aspect of our time together as business partners. And what I'll share with you is that what in my time, I've had many as types of completions. I've had very beautiful completions and I've had very painful completions. And so when I think about this idea of endings are actually they're on the continuum of life, just like life in and of itself, depending on what you believe spiritually. I think that endings are on a continuum. And behind every ending comes a new beginning. And so when I think about this completion, this transition that's happening with me and one of my business partners, I of course, have over time had some anticipatory grieving, a little bit of anxiety, but also there is this hope and there is this possibility of what is to come and what we are to become. And so when we think about endings and this is relationship, but we can think about endings in a lot of different ways. We can think about maybe you're coming to completion of a job. Maybe you're an entrepreneur coming to completion of a contract or a someone who is in therapy coming to completion of your time with a therapist or there are lots of different completions. We are coming to the completion of a year. And I think when we look at coming to a completion, it's important for us to reflect. It's important for us to reflect on what is it that we want to be acknowledged for and what do we want to acknowledge that has worked well. And oftentimes we tend to focus on what's not working well, but we don't always acknowledge what's working well. So when we recognize that that completion is coming, and we recognize the opportunity and the possibilities that come with new beginnings, then we can start by reflecting and actually really having a healthy respect for how we've navigated the journey, however that might have looked. All right. I think that oftentimes we look at the result, but we don't often look at who we become. We don't often give ourselves a healthy respect for who we've become in the journey or who we have been in the journey or how we have been impacted in the journey. So we can reflect and respect, give ourselves and the circumstance the respect that it's due. And that takes a lot of emotional awareness and emotional flexibility. I was talking with a coaching client of mine who is going through a lot of changes in her organization. And, there are some endings that have happened in her organization and some beginnings that are happening, but also she's starting a new beginning in her own personal life. This is a happy beginning. And so as we talked recently about her beginnings and her transitions and the changes, we talked about how it's important to honor the emotion, be aware of, but also honor the emotion that comes up, right? Because whenever there's shifts and changes, like the ocean sometimes is calm and then it gets choppy. The waves come in and they wash out. And this is the way our emotions do. Our emotions are like waves. They come in waves, and excitement comes in waves, and grief comes in waves. And the emotional awareness to know when we're experiencing what we're experiencing, to be able to name that, and the flexibility to allow it and the courage to allow it. She was asking me, well, how long does it take to move through these stages of grief so that I can, as it pertains to some of the things that were happening in her organization that were endings, that were hard transitions, that were hard completions, right? How do I grieve that so that I can enjoy the new beginning? And the reality is that we can't control grief. We cannot control it. But what we can do is maintain an emotional awareness, an emotional recognition, an emotional honoring, and emotional courage to be with those emotions so that we can move through them, right? And then as we move through these changes in our reflection, looking at what's to come, we can look at, well, how do we mirror and model what we want to come to us in the future? Like, how do we model and mirror what it is that we want to see as the new beginnings surface? And I think what's very important to understand that part of completion is repair. So we are courageous as we move through this process of completion and beginning to not only acknowledge what went well, but to acknowledge what didn't work, to acknowledge was there any harm that was done as we complete, and to make amends, to mend, and to engage in the practice of repair. And just as a sidebar, if you hadn't heard, I am actually going to be stepping on the TEDx stage again, March the 20th, 2026 in Asheville, North Carolina. And guess what I'm going to be talking about? I'm going to be talking about the aspect of repair. And so when we can acknowledge what is so, acknowledge what worked, and acknowledge what didn't work, be accountable for our part, then that gives us that access to repair. That gives us that access to mending. and allows us to move forward in the modeling of what's possible. And even when we look at repair and healing, that's possible as well. And then, we've gone through this process as we're moving through completion and looking at new beginnings. And we look at what is to come, recognizing that we are human, recognizing our humanity, recognizing that there's always, we always can maintain a beginner's mind, right? It's practice. And that practice leads to progress. And you'd be surprised at how the little things that we do add up to the big accomplishments, the big steps forward. And so it's all inside of the space of practice, the space of ongoing learning and development. And we must give ourselves grace as we move forward into these new beginnings and honor our humanity in these new beginnings, knowing that we will make mistakes and that we are not aiming for perfection. We are aiming for progress. And that is why life really is a practice, right? Life really is a practice. And so when we look at coming to the end of a year, let's say, but a year, coming to the end of a year can represent coming to the completion of anything. Like, what does that represent for you? Coming to the completion of what are you coming to the completion of? And as we look at coming to the completion of one thing and moving into the beginning of another, we can begin to reframe and remap our space about it, our approach to it, reflecting, respecting, recognizing we can move with emotional awareness, flexibility, and courage. We can mirror and model what we want to see and who we want to be, and where we need to engage in the practice of mending and repair. And we can acknowledge, we can adapt, and we can be accountable for what we promise or what we're committed to, right? What are we really committed to? And hold ourselves accountable. And we can find partners that can help hold us accountable. I have I like who I like to call a biz bestie. Shout out to Dr. Nicole. I have a team who holds me accountable to the goals that I set, to the things that I say that I want to do, how I want to impact the people that I work with, my organizations, my coaching clients, my communities. And my son, my 11-year-old son, he also holds me accountable, and I allow him to hold me accountable because I'm growing as a parent. I'm practicing as a parent. There's no handbook for that. And so I have accountability partners throughout my life in multiple spaces that not only hold me accountable to being who I say I want to be, but also hold me accountable to taking care of myself. I have a wonderful therapist who reflects back to me to make sure that I'm also giving myself grace, but growing at the same time. And so, who are those accountability partners for you, right? That help you to recognize your humanity, that help you to continue to practice the things that you're committed to, keep you expanding, growing, and developing, so that eventually, whether that eventually is fast or that eventually is at a slower pace, eventually the goals that you set, you do reach, right? Because it really does take consistency, commitment, and that is practice. So as we think about the completion in the context of 2025, think about what are the completions that have happened and what are the new beginnings that have happened throughout the year. What are the completions that might happen that you might need to happen in 2026 and the new beginnings that you imagine in 2026? And how will you remap your direction, your mind, your thinking, your action? How will you remap your community to be consistent with that which you're committed to? So I hope that this reflection for you is a valuable one and that you'll take some time, maybe a couple of weeks even, to just sit and reflect on what that is for you. Maybe the month of January you'll take to reflect on what that is for you. And I would love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear from you because then we together can be partners in remapping our lives and remapping our worlds and remapping what we're committed to so that we can achieve what we want to achieve. Is that right? Or be who we want to be. So with that, I leave you and I invite you to share this reflection, with a friend, with a family, with a colleague, with a leader in your organization, with a community member, because this one by one, this taking on of these little practices is what causes the ripples that eventually cause the waves and the tides to shift and change, right? And so share this. And I absolutely appreciate if you could leave a comment on the platform on which you listen to this podcast or watch if you are a YouTube subscriber. And leave that comment because guess what? The platforms, they are a way that other people find this message. And when you leave a comment, it does two things. It lets the platform know that this is valuable content and we want to serve it up to more people so that we can ripple out this message. But it also lets me know and lets those coming behind you know the value that it has brought you. And so please share and also leave us a review. And I will say, if you are listening to this before the new year, happy 2026. And if you're listening to it afterwards, happy 2026. And until the next time we see you, stay empowered.